Good morning. I'm Scott Heyler from the United States Air Force Academy's Department of Management. I have the privilege of moderating today's panel on ethics as a competitive advantage for business. Following panelists' comments this morning, I will facilitate a short question and answer session. Please enter any questions that you may have in the right of the session box. We are pleased to have two panelists with us this morning. Jim Parke, the CEO of Otter Products, LLC, and Blue Ocean Enterprises Incorporated, as well as Tom Arata, Senior Vice President for Global Technology Platforms at Ecolab. Let's start with Jim. Jim, please share with us how your company views ethics as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, Scott, thank you for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. You know, I think ethics is an enormous economic advantage. So let me just give you a little bit of background on our company that'll explain this. You know, we have employees in 27 different countries. We work with some of the biggest companies in the world. I mean, if you look at the top companies in the world by their market cap, we work with those. And you know, one of the things that we have to be careful of is that we're not doing anything that would harm our own credibility in the market or that of our customers. I've seen lots of companies that lose important relationships because of scandals, things that go wrong with them. There's always going to be an opportunity to chase a few dollars in an unethical way, but I'm convinced that the only real path to a sustainable long-term business is to do it the right way. And frankly, life is too short to have a whole bunch of regrets. I mean, going home at night and being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, do you know what? I'm doing this the right way. And my kids can be proud of who I am. I can be proud of who I am because of the way that I run my business. You know, if you think about a competitive advantage, what kind of an advantage is it to never have to worry about a government investigation? To never have to worry about whether you're going to get in trouble with the IRS or the SEC? How much, you know, creative energy is taken out by those type of worries for people that make ethical compromises? I think it's a tremendous thing to be able to live free of those burdens and to be able to focus all of your energy, your creative energy on doing business and doing good business the right way. So yeah, I view ethics as not only a competitive advantage, I think it is the biggest competitive advantage that our company has in the market.
That's great. Thank you very much. Tom, how about you? How does Ecolab view ethics as a competitive advantage?
Well, thank you for the question, Scott, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. The short answer is yes, absolutely. Ethics is a competitive advantage. And I'll give you a couple dimensions to that for Ecolab. And for those of you that don't know Ecolab, we're a global leader in water technology, hygiene, infection prevention. And we serve over 3 million customers globally. And we do that with about 45,000 employees, 25,000 of them who are in the field directly with customers in 170 countries. So for us, in our long period of existence, we're coming up on a 100-year anniversary as a company. Ethics is core to our culture and our operating model. We've been honored to be on Ethisphere's list of most ethical companies for many years now, and it's a recognition that we don't take lightly. For what we do, our customers count on us as partners in solving some really, really challenging problems that impact health and wellness and the environment, and the outcomes that we are involved in and working with our customers directly affect people's lives, and we take that very seriously. And so when you have that kind of a mission, we're executing that through 25,000 people in the field. So it requires a culture that is where ethics is part of the business model. It's not an extra program that you do. It's part and parcel of how you go to market. The customers that we serve are also global customers, and they're being evaluated on metrics that they have set and that the markets are setting for them around ESGs and ethics. And so helping our customers be successful makes us successful. So there's this chain of mission, customer relationships, importance of the outcomes that Ecolab delivers. Our CEO has summarized this, I think, very clearly, and for a way for all of our associates to think about it, as describing our mission as doing well by doing good. And we'll talk a little bit more about, as we get into this, about what does that look like for our organization. But the sensitivity of applications, the diversity of geographies and people that execute that says that if we don't have ethics at a core, we can't be successful. So absolutely, it's core to our competitive advantage.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's bring Jim back in for the next few questions. Jim, I'm wondering, how do you ingrain ethics into the culture of your company?
Yeah, Scott, that's a really good question, because every company, or at least every company I've ever worked with, has a handbook. They've got core values, they've got statements about ethics, but having that is different than living that. And, people come into a company with all sorts of different backgrounds. One of the things that I found is really effective in helping to ingrain ethics is the idea of storytelling. And let me explain that, because that might sound a little bit odd. Highlighting areas where people have had a chance to do the wrong thing and chosen to do what's right. When you find examples of those types of things, it can be really, really powerful. Let me give you just an example. We work with a lot of manufacturers all over the world. And sometimes we find that the level of ethics that exists in other parts of the world is a little bit different than what we're used to here. And at one point, we found out that one of our manufacturers that we were using in China was engaged in some ethical practices around their labor force that we weren't okay with. So we decided that we were going to cut ties with them. They determined that they were going to come to Fort Collins and tell us that they had changed and that they had made a difference and repented, and everything was great and they were going to be perfect from this point forward. And so we tried to live the golden rule. We gave them a meeting, and they showed up and they brought boxes of cookies for everybody. Well, we typically don't let our employees take gifts, but this was a small dollar kind of thing, and so we allowed our employees to take those. And when our manager of supply chain got home and opened his box of cookies to share with his kids, he found $10,000 cash in that box. Now think about that for just a second. If you're that person, there is no way anybody's ever going to find out about that. The people that are bribing you sure aren't going to tell anybody. He was never going to have to tell anybody himself. And think of the vacations, the down payments on a car, the student loans. I mean, so much could happen with that money. And all it would ever cost is his integrity, right? Well, luckily for us, this person chose to do the right thing. They reached out to us and we were able to correct that situation. And that's an amazing thing. I think in order to make sure that this story gets told, you got to be really intentional about it, because, we all need heroes in life. And I'm not talking about Iron Man and Captain America. That's great if you're 5 and you're really super excited about a birthday party. But in business, we need heroes too. We need people that we can look to and say, that's who I want to be. And, to be able to tell a story like that. And so the way that we handled that situation in our next company meeting, we brought that person up on stage and I showed some pictures and I told the story of what this person had done. And, the people remember that 5 years later. They remember that in a big way, because we presented that employee with a check that after tax would yield $10,100 as a way to show that not only is doing the right thing what we expect at the company, but over the long term, it's going to be way more beneficial and profitable for each individual as well. That one act did more to ingrain ethics in our culture than anything that we could have ever put in our handbook. Finding good examples, highlighting good examples, and making sure that this is not just something that's in a book or on a poster, but it's something that's talked about frequently is, I think, a really big part of doing this. So that's a big piece of what I would say as a piece of advice in how to ingrain ethics into your culture. You've got to find the examples and you've got to tell the stories.
That's a fantastic example, and I think a great example on both the company side and the individual side as far as how you guys responded. So thanks for that. Tom, any thoughts on that, on how you ingrain ethics into the culture at Ecolab?
Yeah, I would echo what Jim said about storytelling, and I know Erica was talking about that earlier in the keynote. And storytelling is very powerful, and it crosses cultures. So when we're thinking about, how do you train people in 170 different countries, storytelling travels very, very well. And so that is, I think, one piece of it. I think another piece of it is tone from the top. I think Erica was talking about a story where in a hospitality industry, the frontline people were well trained, and then it just kind of fell off as you went to levels of managers on certain aspects of their operation. If the tone is not from the top, it doesn't really matter how good the training is or how good the handbook is around code of conduct. So I think that's part of it. Obviously, robust reporting mechanisms, that safe space for employees to share concerns, and that there's mutual accountability around that. I think the last thing for us is the idea that sustainability as an enterprise, ethics is part of the sustainable enterprise. There's many things that our companies do, good companies do around ESGs. If ethics aren't part of that definition of sustainability, there's a problem. And so it's kind of all of the above, but I think storytelling is so powerful and it travels well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that insight, Tom. Let me stick with you real quickly and ask, how do you reinforce growing your business while still maintaining those ethical business relationships?
I think, well, I hope I'm live here. Because there's a sound cut out, so I apologize. So the question is how to reinforce growing a business. For us, it's focusing and valuing long-term relationships with our customers, long-term relationships with our associates, long-term relationships in the communities where we operate. And so for us, it's making sure we don't lose the thread of ethics in all those long-term relationships. The market evolves, we innovate. One of the fastest growing areas of innovation for us and for others is the role of data. And data is an area where you can do powerful things from an innovation point of view, but you also have to be very intentional when you have access to data, how you're ethically using that data that's coming in from sensors and control systems. So as companies grow, if you keep your eye on the long haul and you keep the ethical lens, I think that's how we think about reinforcing that as we grow our business.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Jim, any thoughts on that? How do you maintain ethical business relationships while at the same time trying to grow your company?
Yeah, growing a company is hard. It just is. There's no easy way to do that. And trying to do that in an ethical way is harder. There are always shortcuts that you can take in business. And anybody that's ever run a business knows that, and they've experienced this. You can sell your integrity for, some small opportunity every day of the week if you want. And, one of the challenges that I find is as a business is growing, it becomes harder to maintain that ethical footing because you're hiring. Every time you hire somebody, it's kind of like bringing somebody new onto an airplane. If they're sick, if they've got a cough, pretty soon everybody on the plane's going to get that cough. And so we've got to be really careful about who we're bringing in to our company during these times, especially times when there's a lot of temptation and growing companies run into some problems. And I frankly think that running a growing company is far harder than running a business that's just kind of steady or that's declining. There's unique challenges that come there, and man, you've got to have surrounded yourself with people that are really committed to the same level of values that you are. People tend to hire others that have similar values to them. Now, I'm a firm advocate of diversity. I'm a firm advocate of trying to find people that think differently. But from a values perspective, if you've got a manager or a leader that is willing to cut corners, they're probably going to hire people that are willing to cut corners as well. And I think you've got to manage those things, those small details of your business really effectively. I don't know of any other way to win and to maintain your ethics.
Thanks for that, Jim. So that's actually a perfect segue into our next section. And I'll ask this of both of you, and we'll start with Jim. Could you describe then how you go about hiring ethical employees? So you talked about wanting to have people that are ethical in the company so you don't spread a virus through the airplane, as you mentioned. But how do you go about hiring those ethical employees? How do you identify them?
Yeah, I wish I had a perfect way to go about this. In an interview, everybody's on their best behavior. They've polished their resume. They've brushed the dust off their suit, whatever is necessary to make them look good. And you got to find ways to break through some of that. One of the things that we do is we have a cultural interview before we have an interview with a functional manager. And the idea there is to get a sense of who somebody really is. And, I find a high correlation in what I will call the jerk factor. People that treat other people poorly are often people that will also make ethical compromises. If you find somebody that has the self-restraint to treat other people well, you have a higher likelihood that they're going to be willing to make the right decisions when it's hard from an ethical perspective. But, we make mistakes, and every company does, because you simply can't gain enough information about somebody during an interview process to really know what's in their heart. What that means is that on an ongoing basis, we have to continue to interview our employees, even when they're working for us. And we do that through a review process that's a little bit unique. When we give an employee a review, we're looking for two things. Number one, how well do they do their job? And number two, how well are they living our values? And if we find somebody that is, really good at living our values, but they're struggling with their job, there are a lot of things that we can do to help them. We will bend over backwards to find a way for them to work. If we find somebody that's really good at doing their job, but frankly, they have trouble living our ethics, they're not complicit with our values, the only real question at that point is how do we help them decide to work somewhere else? Because ethics is something that I think you can motivate and you should motivate, but there's some people that have made decisions earlier in their life that if they're not willing to live to the level of ethics that your company has, maybe they're better off working somewhere else.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. Tom, how about you? The challenge of hiring ethical employees. How does Ecolab handle that?
I would echo what Jim said. It's people always are on their best behavior in interviews, and I think this goes beyond hiring. It goes to things such as assessing fits or likelihoods of success of acquisitions and things like this. Cultural fit trumps a lot of other characteristics of technical competence, and the best accountant, the best researcher, the best marketer. And so we start with this idea of being mission driven for the areas that we serve, and that purpose. So we're looking for people that are empowered and engaged, energized by that mission and purpose. And so at least the way we go through interviewing, that cultural fit is weighted very, very heavily, and almost to the point where there's some presumptions of technical competence, but if the cultural fit isn't there, we're not going to go forward. It could be the best tax accountant in the world, but that really is a heavily weighted factor for us as we interview employees and onboard people.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to skip real quickly to the Q&A because we've talked a little bit about the fit for an organization. One of the questions that came in is that you've both discussed the importance of diversity. Numerous studies indicate diverse and inclusive cultures contribute to competitive advantage. How do your companies leverage diverse and inclusive cultures while maintaining that fit and that ethical culture? Jim, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I wholeheartedly agree. Ethics, like diversity, they're both competitive advantages. And sometimes I think we run into situations where the two can be at odds with each other. If we're so focused on trying to achieve diversity that we're willing to treat people unfairly or make compromises, it can have a backlash within a company. And at the same time, if we're so focused on ethics that we're only willing to hire people that look like us, or that we are 100% certain are going to conform to our value system, I think we've got major problems. One of the things that you have to strive for in business is balance. And diversity is a topic that I don't know if it's been a bigger topic at any point in my career than it is right now. Moving forward, finding ways to be diverse in an authentic way is really important. And let me just be vulnerable here for a second. Our company is based in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is not the most diverse community in America. We have challenges recruiting and finding and bringing in people from diverse backgrounds here. But do you know what? We have the exact same challenge in our offices in Hong Kong and Shenzhen, China. Trying to find diversity in those regions is really challenging. And so managing diversity as a global company, it's not an easy thing. And it's great for a bumper sticker, and it's great for, slogans. But when the rubber really hits the road, you've got to be committed to it, because anything less than full commitment will result in inauthenticity, lip service, and no results.
Great. Yeah, I think the importance of balance can't be understated. Trying to maintain that balance is critically important. Tom, how about your thoughts on hiring diverse employees while ensuring a good fit for an ethical culture?
Yeah, I think it's a both and topic. One does not come independent of the other. So, we believe, we have a philosophy, and we believe we are a better company. We're a more innovative company because of the diversity of cultural backgrounds from all of our associates wherever we operate. That doesn't come independently of the culture of ethics in the company. I'd go back to an earlier point, and this is where I think the role of storytelling comes in, is that the values that don't change, that travel through a corporation, are communicated well through stories, and so the ambition to be ever more diverse and inclusive in hiring and workforce goes hand in hand with the mission to be ever more ethical in operations. So it's a both and kind of a topic.
Great, thanks for that insight, Tom. So one more prepared question, and then we'll dive into the Q&A from the audience. So for both of you, how has the current pandemic affected your approach to ethics? Tom, you want to take that one first?
Sure. And I would say it's been a particular journey for me, because one of my responsibilities is public health for Ecolab globally. At the start of the pandemic, our CEO got us, the senior leadership team, together, and he had a very simple message. And the message was, we are living history, and each one of us are going to remember how we responded to it. And that was a challenge that has all sorts of implications, operationally, and most importantly, ethically, culturally. How are we going to respond to this unprecedented situation? For us, we kept our focus on the long term, and the kinds of things that we think define us as an ethical company. We provided pay protection for our associates who were not able even to get into some of their customers. We really codified something we call science certified, an approach to our customers, so that we could become the trusted, data-driven, compliant source of programs that where our customers needed it for infection control. And I think we balanced quite well the need to be there for our customers with the need to have safe conditions for our field and for our plants. What that did as a side benefit, and this is where ethics, just keeps on giving as a core of the corporation, is that accelerated our innovation in digital technology and the use of remote technology to enable our people to do their work safely and still help our customers get things done. So if the values are solid, and you're playing for the long term, ethics can help inform what you do. And so anyway, I would just go back to how I started this, is that idea of living history and being accountable for your role in it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Jim, how about you? How has the pandemic affected your approach to ethics?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that you can't really separate ethics from the way that you treat people. The two things really go hand in hand in almost every area. And, from our business perspective, we have a lot of sales online, but the majority of our sales happen in stores. And almost overnight, every retail location that carried our products closed their doors. Mm-hmm. And we went from having a remarkable beginning to a year to almost zero revenue. And where we've got employees all over the world, we had to ask ourselves some really tough questions. And from an ethical standpoint, we had to say, how are we going to treat our employees? How are we going to help them through this difficult time? Well, we had managed our cash well. We knew that rainy days come, and we had put ourselves in a good spot. And we decided that now was time that we needed to use some of that. And so it looked like the following. I mean, we set two priorities. Number one was we were going to make sure that our employees were safe, not only physically, but economically. And number two, we were going to do whatever was necessary to position our business to be successful when the pandemic came to an end. On that first piece, what that meant is that there's some employees that needed to continue working in a warehouse environment. And we spent millions of dollars retrofitting things overnight to make sure that those environments were safe. And as a matter of fact, earlier this week, we had our first incident of an at-work transmission of the virus. But through all of this, we've had literally hundreds of people and thousands of people working in our distribution centers, and not had a single, until this week, transmission of the virus because of that. The other thing was recognizing that when people are exposed in different areas of their life, especially hourly employees, that would have a major impact on their ability to provide for their families. And so putting in place things like, extra time off that was paid even before the government mandated that, doing things like paying hazard pay. So we were paying time and a half for all of our distribution center workers, and then double time, even during months that we had almost no revenue. Now that required some sacrifices for people in other areas. I mean, I went for 4 months without taking a paycheck. Our board of directors, we all decided that we weren't going to get paid during this time. But we did make sure that every other employee got a paycheck every 2 weeks, just like they had before. And I think the ethical piece here was not so much of how do we deal with other companies or people trying to cheat. It was how do we take care of each other? And, for me, the pandemic has really enforced that connection between ethics and relationships. The two are inseparable in most ways.
Yeah, thanks to both of you. I appreciate the care and concern that both of you express for your employees. That's huge. So let's go to some more of the questions from the audience. The first one asks, we hear a lot about personal accountability in ethics discussions. What, in your opinion, is the most effective method of internal accountability for ethical behavior by an organization as a whole? For example, incentives versus punishments. So how do you go about reinforcing that individual ethical behavior? Let's see, Jim, you want to go first?
Yeah, accountability is a kind of a buzzword in business, and here's my take on it. The only real effective accountability is the accountability that comes from inside somebody. Everything else is trying to change their behavior and trying to manipulate what they do or don't do based on either economic incentives or threats of punishments or anything else. The best accountability is to hire people that are naturally going to hold themselves accountable. People that, like the Daniels teaches, live to a set of principles in their lives that we don't have to worry about them making compromises. Now, that doesn't excuse us from putting those types of things in place, but they're really secondary. And so finding ways to, create a situation where if somebody sees something going in a bad direction ethically, they not only feel safe, but they feel like they're going to be taken care of when they report something like that. It's really tough to incentivize good behavior because, if you offer an economic incentive and say, every time you do the right thing, we're going to give you, X bonus, or it just, there's really no effective way to administer something like that. And so at the end of the day, you're really trying to say, look, we're going to do everything that we can to motivate you to make the right decisions. We're going to put in place procedural checks to make sure that if somebody makes a bad decision, it doesn't go too very far. And that when we find out that somebody's crossed one of those lines, we don't mess around with them. There's a few things that I don't countenance in our business, and ethical violations are the quickest way to get shown the door. And I honestly don't feel a bit of remorse or regret about that. If somebody is willing to put not only their career, but our company and other people's jobs at risk, I'm happy for them to leave and go elsewhere. And so, a couple of incidents like that, and people get the idea really quickly that there's only one way to succeed at our company, which is to live by the ethical standards that we've set. And I appreciate that might sound very harsh to people, and I don't intend that to be offensive to anybody, but at the same time, there are a lot of people applying for every single job. I mean, we get over 200 applicants for every single job that we post. I'm not going to deny good people that want a job, an opportunity, in favor of somebody that's shown that they're not willing to live our core values.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, if nothing else, it's a very clear standard to set. So I'm sure that that helps people know where they stand. Tom, how about your thoughts on accountability for individuals from a company perspective in terms of ethical behavior?
Jim said it so well. There's very little I could add to it. The only thing I would maybe just give some perspective is that what Jim described is ethics that's integral to the company's culture. So the ethical employee is sharing in the company's success. Their career is growing, the company is growing. And so, if you were going to go down the road of what incentives could possibly be there, you're starting to set a situation where ethics is something separate from the core mission and what that employee is there to do to help the company achieve its mission. So certainly the mechanisms of helping people leave that won't operate ethically, those have to be strong and robust. But I think it's critical that ethics on the is viewed as part of the company's way it's going to grow, and not something separate. So the success of the company is the incentive.
Great. Thanks for that, Tom. I appreciate it. Here's a good question, I think, for the audience that we have. Do you find that colleges are adequately preparing students to be ethical employees? What more could business schools and other places do to prepare individuals for a job at your company, for instance? Tom, you want to start on that one?
Yeah. First of all, I think the work that's being done by the Daniels Fund is phenomenal, and the idea of ethics as a core component of undergraduate education and graduate school education is spot on, and so I think that work and the work that takes place with case studies that's done within the Daniels Fund is really some world-class efforts to not just teach concepts around ethics, but to bring that into stories. We've been talking about stories a lot today. And so I think that is powerful, and it's a muscle. It's a muscle that is informed by parts of education and is used, as the not just in the years in college, but then as the students join the workforce. So I think there's some really good examples being done today.
Great, thank you. How about you, Jim? Any things you wish that your new employees would be getting from their college education, particularly in the business schools?
You know, I think there's kind of two things that I'd say there. The first is, you know, college campuses are places of a free flow of ideas, and I think that's wonderful, and it's integral to the educational process. I think one of the things that we need to help students recognize is that when they're faced with an ethical dilemma, most of the time the right answer is going to be right here. It's going to be in their gut. They're going to have a reaction, and you know, when they spend time doing what you do in a classroom, which is trying to explore the issue from every angle, you end up in a spot of rationalization. I've met very few people in my career that end up going to work saying, I'm going to do something unethical today. It just doesn't happen. They get caught in a situation and then they go down the rabbit hole of rationalization, and pretty soon they've convinced themselves that up is down and black is white and everything else. And so I would say one of the things that we need to teach students is it's not always an academic exercise. Sometimes you know the right answer and you've got to have the courage to follow that. The second thing that I would say is it takes skill, not just resolve, but it takes skill to be an ethical person in business. You know, I've been in so many situations where it seems like there's no way out other than, you know, slamming your hand on the table and walking away. And sometimes you've got to be willing to do that. But as a new college graduate that starts at a job and their boss asks them to do something that they're uncomfortable with, are we properly preparing them with the skills to work through that situation so that they don't feel like their only choice is to quit? And I talk to a lot of college students because I do a lot of talking and speaking at colleges on the topic of business ethics. And that's the thing that so many students are afraid of. They're going to pick an employer to go work for, and they're going to get caught in this situation. And then all of a sudden they're going to quit and be unemployed because they want to maintain their ethics. In almost every instance that I've seen in my career, there's a path forward without having to walk away from the organization. But there's skills that you have to learn. There's a great book written by a professor out of BYU called the Business Ethics Field Guide. I buy that book by the box, and I give copies of that book out frequently, almost to every new hire that we have, because it's such a good way for them to see that there are skills and there are things that can be helpful for them in learning how to navigate these situations. So yeah, that's what I would say. Recognize that right is right, and sometimes you don't have to go through a long exercise to know what you knew at the start. What's right is right, and it's going to take some skill to be ethical in business.
That's awesome. Thank you. So here's one specifically for Tom, but obviously, Jim, if you've got something on this, to speak to the other side of the hiring question, what can a candidate do proactively to present themselves as an ethical or culturally appropriate member of the team? So someone coming into an interview, what are the things you're looking for?
I would say that first of all, we're looking for do they understand the mission? Do they understand what we're in the market to do? What are we all about? You know, are we about making sure people don't get sick with an infection once they're in a hospital, or don't get sick from some food that they eat? We really want to see that they understand the mission. And if you understand the mission and the gravity of that mission, and can speak to that, why is that the place they want to go spend their career, that's a really good predictor of, you know, you've thought it through and you understand why this is a place you want to be. So I think that's the start for us, is the candidate. If the candidate, you know, comes in and says, hey, you know, I saw you were recruiting on campus, seems like you're an interesting company, fine. If the candidate comes in and says, boy, I've been reading and I see what you all are doing in the healthcare space or in the water conservation space, and this is why I think this is a fit for me, that's much more powerful and much more of a predictor that they understand how their qualifications would have to map to the mission.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. We're coming to the end of our time, but I'm going to take the opportunity as the moderator to ask a question of my own real quickly. When you see unethical companies succeed, how do you get your employees or even yourself to stay the course as you watch these other companies be successful with unethical behaviors? Jim, you want to try that one on for size?
Yeah, I just tell them to wait a few minutes. I mean, unethical behavior catches up with you. It just does. And, you know, there's an argument that people make all the time, and I deal with this, that, you know, you can be unethical. Eventually, you're going to get caught, but the government fine is never as much as the profit you've made in the meantime. And if your view of life is purely numbers driven and economics driven, maybe that's a formula that works out for you. That's never made sense in my mind. You know, the definition of success for any of us, if it's only economic, then probably you shouldn't be in business because it's a dangerous environment for you. If you see your role in life and the opportunity that you have is trying to make a difference, to be a force for good in the world, business can absolutely be the method that you use to do that. But you've got to look at it as more than just a set of numbers. And, you know, one of the things that I started here, I've got 5 kids, and my 5 kids deserve to be able to look at their dad and say, he's my hero. He's the person I want to be. And I want to be happy what I see when I look in the mirror. And I'm not talking about male pattern baldness. I'm talking about having a sense that I am authentic and that I'm doing the right thing and making a difference in the world. So, you know, companies are going to experience various degrees of success at any given time, but man, there's a lot of unhappiness that goes along with that kind of success, and I don't want any part of it.
That's a terrific insight. Thanks for that, Tom. Any last minute thoughts on how you react when other companies are acting unethically?
Yeah, I think it's for what I coach, you know, our folks to do is we're in it for the long haul, and we want to do the right things in the right way. And you know, the folks that go about things unethically, it always catches up with them. You know, so if we have the trusted relationship with our customers because we are an ethical company and we're doing the right things the right way, you know, I'll bet on that all day long over the folks that kind of come and go with, you know, unethical things that they do.
That's fantastic. Any final comments real quickly as we come to the end of our time together, Jim?
You know, let me just speak to students for a second. You can do this. You can make a huge difference in the world through business, and you can literally change people's lives by just choosing to do the right thing. Most of what you need to know about ethics you learned in your home, you learned in your church, you learned in your kindergarten class. Focus on those lessons, because that in most instances is going to be the right answer. And I just want to express, I mean, you see so much bad in the news. That's the exception. The reality is that most people are good and they want to do the right thing. And if you are one of those people, which I hope you are, stay the course. Make the decision now to do the right thing and stick to that decision, and you will have a lot of happiness in life.
Awesome. How about you, Tom? Any closing thoughts real quickly?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you again for this opportunity. I would encourage the students to think of, you know, their journey with ethics as a muscle to be built. It's to learn, it's to work with it. It's really just to make that more and more part and parcel of who you are and how you present yourself to the world. And education's got a critical role in it. And I think that just looking at the opportunities to build that muscle and work with that muscle will be lifetime dividends for everyone.
Great. Well, it looks like we are coming to the end of our time. So thank you, gentlemen, both for sharing your time and your experiences with us. For everybody in the group, we'll now take a short break and join our small groups for discussion. One student from each group will be presenting the key takeaways at the wrapping it up session at the end of the day. So please enjoy your small group discussion after this small break. Thank you.